Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I'm Kashi Sehgal, your host, and we have an amazing show, as always, for you today. I want to welcome all of our students, young professionals, the high schoolers, the college students, the grad students. We've got all kinds of people joining us today and week to week. So without further ado, I'm going to bring our speaker on. We have Rachel Sprecher with us today. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Kashi.
So Rachel is the executive director for the Office of Partnerships and Development for the Atlanta Public School System. So she has a big role, and she is going to talk with us today about what that means and her career path and all of that. So Rachel, let's start with, where did you go to school? Where are you from? Where did you go to school? What did you major in?
Sure. Well, I am from the DC metropolitan area. Originally, I was born in Washington, D.C., and I grew up in Maryland in the suburbs of D.C. I went to college at University of Maryland. And then I studied American Studies and Sociology. Which if you know anything about that, those are very like liberal arts degrees, not very, technical in terms of like a trade or career. But I was really fascinated just by human behavior and our country. And so American Studies and Sociology were really amazing kind of generalist degrees for me. But when I graduated from University of Maryland, it was time to get jobs, and I realized I didn't really have a marketable skill. So I decided to go to grad school, and I went to grad school for a master's in professional writing because I always had a knack for writing. And I thought that everyone would need writers, and being a good writer is a good skill to have. So I went to Towson University, which is a small college in Baltimore. They had a master's of professional writing program. And I learned about technical writing, grant writing. I took a screenwriting course, and it was just really an amazing degree. And then after that, I started working in education, using my degree, becoming a grant writer. And from there, my career has just kind of taken off. So that's kind of my background and what kind of brings me to today.
Well, cool. So professional writing, sociology, and American studies. That is quite a combination, but that just means you can write really well about what's going on in America and how to think about people in this country. So that's great. That's great. Very useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so walk us through your career path. How did you get from grad school to where you are today? Just kind of high level.
Yeah. So I kind of took a really, what I would call non-traditional path. I really was not one of those people that knew what they wanted to be or knew exactly the kind of job that I wanted. But I was a hard worker. And so I think my work ethic, I just leaned on that, and I was like, I will just find the job that I'm meant to do, and things will just kind of happen. And that's kind of how my career has unfolded. But, my parents were both educators. My dad, a teacher, and my mom, a superintendent. And so I always thought I would work in public education, but they actually warned me not to be a teacher. They said, being a teacher is really hard. It's kind of thankless. You don't make a lot of money. And so that's why I didn't, get an undergraduate degree in education and didn't pursue teaching. So when I left grad school and I had this, professional writing degree, I started to dabble in different jobs. It was 2008. So that was around the time of the Obama campaign. And so I started working on the Obama campaign with my professional writing degree, kind of editing direct mail. But that was, of course, just like a seasonal position. And so when it was over, I just felt like being called back to education. And so I took a job in a nonprofit that supported schools. It connected businesses to schools. And then from there, I started to work in the school district itself, because I got recruited by the school system after working for that nonprofit, working with families and community partnerships. And so that's when I got the bug for community partnerships, and schools, and connecting like the business community to schools. And it was a boss that I had there when I worked in the school district, and this is in Maryland, who said, he took a job in North Carolina in another school district. And he's like, I want you to come with me. The only job we have is grant writer. Can you do that? And I was like, why, yes, I can do that. I have a degree in writing. So I took the job and started writing grants, for the kids in the school district in North Carolina, bringing in extra resources for them, where the school district money couldn't pay for things. And then from there was a job for grant writer in Atlanta public schools, and seemed like a good fit. So I came to work in Atlanta and did that. And then after about 2 years of, doing that, grant writing, I became the executive director of partnerships and development for Atlanta public schools. So it was a little bit of a rocky start, but eventually I got into this like pretty cool, niche. And from there, my career is kind of like one thing has led to another.
So did you ever think that you would leave the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area? I mean, you're not so far away. I went to school in D.C. too, but it's a jump, you jumped a couple of times. So what is that like?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. And the answer is no. I never thought I would leave there. It was such a comforting little bubble where I grew up, and in the DC area, like kind of has it all. And I just was like, I'll never leave. But what happened was when my boss, in Maryland was going to North Carolina, I was kind of in a spot in my personal life where I was like a little bit, I wouldn't say stuck, but I was a little bit stagnant or complacent. And it just seemed like a great opportunity to say yes to. And I was like, North Carolina, like, sure. I mean, I thought I'm like the South. I definitely had some prejudices about the South. And I was like, is that like hillbilly down there?
Just like we do of the North.
Yeah. Yankee. Yeah. But I was like, you know what? Things aren't really moving for me around here, like in Maryland. Like, let me just try it. It'll be like study abroad. I didn't think I would go for that long. But I went, and I seized that opportunity, and it just opened my eyes to so much. I've grown so much. I'm definitely the only one in my friend group from home and my family who's left. So that's been interesting. And I have a little bit of, FOMO sometimes when they're all up there like together. However, like I've learned so much about people, and in North Carolina, where I worked was more of like a rural district. So I learned about rural poverty and kind of the plight of folks that live in, more of a rural environment. And it just has changed my life so much. I've grown so much. And then being in Atlanta has just been amazing. So it was definitely worth it, although it was hard. But now I'll never leave. The cost of living is too good, and land is too good, and I love the South now. But yes, I never in a million years thought I would, but I took the chance, and it was a good decision.
That's great. Yeah, it definitely, it can pay off to take a leap. So you are in partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
You're also in development.
Yes.
And those are two careers or roles that are usually very separate. They're two distinct roles within an organization. So how do those two roles complement each other? I mean, they have different needs and different skill sets, but they have some of the same, right? So how do they complement each other? And how do you hone that skill of like using one experience to complement the other and vice versa? Like, how do you really develop that as a student even?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are some common themes between like the two kind of roles or the two kind of fields. those being relationship building. I mean, at the core of what I do for both forming partnerships and both in development, in fundraising, is relationships. So, I really lean on my interpersonal skills and just kind of wanting to meet more people. And even if I don't have, an agenda, even if there's no, possibility for partnership or fundraising, I still want to meet those people, because you never know when one day you might have to call them for something for the schools, or, something that we're looking for something for our students. And, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could call that person because I met them. So there are some like common, like just like basic skills that I rely on that can be used and can be transferable. But the partnership work, is really about kind of engaging with nonprofits, individuals, companies, anyone that really wants to like get engaged with our schools. So I have to really be a generalist about our district, and I have to know a little bit about everything. And I may not be the subject matter expert, but I can be a connector. So that's another thing that I do, is I'm definitely a connector. And if I don't know the answer about, math curriculum, I know to go to the math coordinator. So I really just help our partners navigate our school district, get to the right school, get to the right department, whatever resonates with them. And then in the development work, sometimes they do go hand in hand, because with fundraising, sometimes one of our corporate partners might want to give a gift. So sometimes they do, they lend their time in terms of volunteering. I'm thinking about Delta Airlines. They do some reading and mentorship programs and apprenticeship programs, but then sometimes they donate money as well. So sometimes they intersect, which is great. And then other times it is kind of separate, but again, those kind of themes and threads kind of tie them together. And I'm kind of always, moving and shaking in some kind of way.
Yeah. How do you, what's the role of networking? How did you hone that skill?
It was really hard for me. I think I'm definitely not an introvert, but I also am not a huge extrovert either. So I do get shy in like, if there's like a networking event, it's hard for me. I have to like kind of like work myself up a little bit, but I think, I started small when I first became like executive director. I started just like leaning on like individuals that I knew to help me, and like would go to like one-on-one lunches, and I would ask their advice, and they would say, oh, you should probably go to like this, organization, or you should go to this summit that happens every Friday. And so I just kind of started putting myself out there. And now it's not as scary for me, because I'm just authentic. I realized that I was intimidated before about like networking and meeting maybe like really, important, fancy, high level individuals. In my job, sometimes I do have to meet with like the C-suite executives, or maybe like really high powered people. But I realized along the way, like, they're human beings too. And as long as you're authentic and yourself, then it's really easy. So I always thought I had to like be rehearsed, or like have a script, or say the right words. But I find that I like definitely excel better if I'm just myself, and like literally talking like this, and just kind of using the words that come out of my mouth and stuff. And that tends to lead to more authentic relationships. And then now, as long as I have that, I can walk into like the event and just start talking to anyone, and things like that.
Yeah, it's definitely, people want to meet real people. That's what we all respond to. So just being yourself is the best possible advice. Be respectful, but be yourself.
Yeah.
Not saying that all of you are respectful. I know that that's true.
Yeah. But it's like, I guess like, I always thought, of course, refined and polished and stuff, but I always thought I had to like say all the right things. Yeah. Or like, do all my research and stuff. And I still do research before I meet someone, like, especially if I'm having a meeting with someone, it's good to like do your background. But as long as I'm, kind of generally like authentic and genuine and, just showcase my personality, it's worked out a lot better.
What do you think the role of education is today in our world?
It's like,
has it evolved?
Yes. I mean, I think especially, well, I think before the pandemic, it was even changing, because if you think about the history of education, the way that it was kind of set up was to be very like a factory almost. It was like public education was like, let's get, our youth in here to learn specific skills so they could, go on to work in industry, and kind of like a widget factory. And unfortunately, a lot of that has remained the same. The kind of structure of public education with like one teacher in front of like a classroom of students. We still have that model. However, we know that times have changed in terms of like the careers that are available now and the different learning levels of students. So I think gone are the days where like that model of like one size fits all works. And so I think especially the pandemic has highlighted that, traditional school like really won't cut it anymore. And that maybe instead of teaching like the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, although we should be teaching other skills like financial literacy or, life skills, or focusing on the social, emotional, and mental wellness of kids, and maybe not really guiding everyone toward college, but maybe college and career, and kind of broadening like the purpose. So, and I think another thing I just want to add is like, I think everyone's realized during the pandemic that schools provide a lot more than just education and academics. We've been a food provider. We've been a telecommunications provider, an internet provider. I've learned so much I never thought I would know about internet and terabytes and things like that.
Yeah, fast speed access. Yeah, exactly.
So what is the purpose of school then if the school has really become like the center of a community? Maybe it's more than just.
I was going to say the community hub. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
It's where all the spokes come out of.
Exactly. So I don't know the answer, but I know it's changing. I know it's evolving. I know that teachers, I think, are being more respected. Finally, it's the stuff that we've been saying for years. Like that's such a unsung hero profession, and maybe they ought to be paid as much as like Steph Curry and LeBron James, and
not maybe, absolutely
they should be. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that things will change, and people will realize the value of schools, and we could see some really tremendous outcomes. But we will just have to see how this pans out.
Yeah. Well, you guys are really doing great work at Atlanta Public Schools. So thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Sure.
So, all right, you went through Lead Atlanta. I also went through Lead Atlanta. So we are Lead alum. Why are leadership development programs useful for a career? And how would students and even younger students start looking for opportunities to develop these leadership skills?
Yeah, I think they're critical. I think for me, I think leadership programs like Lead Atlanta and others I've participated in have given me confidence. I spoke like a second ago about how like even I get nervous sometimes and don't feel I don't have like a strong belief or self-esteem sometimes, or I feel like the term imposter syndrome, like I don't belong here in these rooms and things like that. But a leadership program can give you the confidence that like, yes, you can. So if for nothing else and nothing around the other like skills and things you learn, I just think, getting confidence is something that, you're going to need. Any student, any professional is going to need that to wake up and do their job, with conviction. And then I think the second thing is the exposure. So, when you're in a leadership program, you get to go to new places that you like might have never been able to have the opportunity to go to before. And you'll be with other people that you likely may not have met ever in your life, and they could become like one of your best friends. So exposure to people and exposure to places, exposure to, indirectly then careers that you might not have thought of. So I totally encourage participation in those. And there's a lot of great ones here in Georgia, and elsewhere, national ones too. But they're amazing, and everyone should seize those opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree. You're also on a lot of boards, great boards, and it gives you an opportunity to use your skill set in a different way. Can you talk about why boards are important to you, and like how, as a young professional, you can even navigate your way onto a board of some sort, or prepare yourself for that as a student?
Yeah. I mean, I think board service gives you a chance to give back in, so many ways. So, like, serving on a board of a nonprofit, you can lend your time, which is really valuable. So sometimes that's volunteering with the organization, or it's also just like giving your time for the meetings, and really important stuff happens in those board meetings that could, inform the direction of the nonprofit, and then in turn the services that the nonprofit provides. So that's an amazing opportunity. Your talent. So maybe you have a great skill set that you can lend to a nonprofit. A lot of times nonprofits are very limited in capacity in terms of staff and expertise and resources. So if you have a skill like budgeting or finance that you can lend, I mean, that's an amazing thing. And then, I think just being of servant. So when I'm on a board, it's kind of my way of, it's my passion. So like if you're in a job that maybe you don't get to flex your servant spirit in all the time, being on a board gives you that outlet to do something good for the community. So I can't recommend it enough. And I've met amazing people. I've been a part of like really important decisions. So like one of the boards I'm on is Hands on Atlanta, which does amazing work to try to combat Atlanta's major challenges. And we've made really strategic decisions in that board about what programs that we're going to offer. And so now they offer programs for youth, a Saturday like education program. They have expanded to more like civic engagement, like around versus like traditional volunteering, which maybe they used to do with like volunteer service hours or like working on a garden and planting trees. And now it's more like civic engagement, like voting and marching and protesting. So that's been just amazing to be a part of. So I think everyone should try to get on a board if you can. And the way you do that is, of course, by networking, reaching out to the nonprofits that you're interested in with the causes that resonate with you. And then, volunteering a lot. If you just volunteer for the organization, that sometimes can lead to, an eventual seat on the board.
Yep. All good strategies. We're going to jump over to some student questions.
Great.
Okay. So Casey would like to know, what is the hardest thing about your job?
Ooh. I think the hardest thing about there's like two hard things. One is it's hard. There's so much need, I think, in Atlanta public schools. And I think our students, about 80% of them come from socioeconomically disadvantaged households. So there's a lot of need that comes with students that live in poverty, even outside of the classroom, as we've talked about. So, I want to help their families. I want to help their, families get, successful, stable employment. I want to help families, who are food insecure, but there's only so much I can do with, education and the small team that I have to raise resources. So I think just the need outweighing the capacity is something just like weighs heavy on my heart, and just like that we're not able to like solve all the problems. And it takes a long time, and our kids are still struggling. So that is hard. And then I would say the second hardest part is the how do I say this like politically correctly, Kashi?
There's no going to be politically correct.
The opinions, I think, of the public. So as a government entity, we have a lot of decisions to make for 50,000 kids. I mean, that's a lot of kids. It ranges from north to south, Buckhead to Bankhead, South Atlanta. So there's so many different things to think about, and we have to think systemically, and we can't think about every individual student's and family's needs, unfortunately. So I think the system of public education that's kind of what I was talking about before. Like, it's been set up that way for so long, but maybe it's time for a change. It's been set up for like the masses. So when you have to think in the systemic way, you have to think about what's equitable. And that sometimes can lead to a lot of public opinions or public outcry about decisions that we have to make. And sometimes it's not very pretty. I mean, sometimes they call us names and stuff. And there's blogs and Facebooks about like how untalented we are and how, not intelligent we are. And that really hurts as like a professional, because I'm like, I'm working my butt off every day for these kids. I promise you. But no one sees like the inside, the sausage making, if you will. So that can be really hard, and that can, be a little bit discouraging. But, the mission of APS and the mission to serve kids and make sure they graduate ready for college and career, that kind of keeps me going.
Well, Rachel, people say this all the time, and it is definitely true of what you just said. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. And so if there's one thing I've learned from doing this show and like everything that's happened over the last several months, it's that the leaps and bounds and evolving ideas that are going to come about for education because of everything we're going through right now, they're going to be so great. And so careers in ed tech, so where you're coming up with technologies to help facilitate learning, and just all kinds of, even like being in the school system or helping to set policy or whatever it is. I mean, thinking about education is going to become, it's already such a big thing, but it's going to become even bigger given what you're saying. There is need for a different way of doing things. So, and we appreciate, again, I keep saying this, like we really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Ed would like to know what makes a good leader.
Oh, Ed, that's a great question. I think humility makes a great leader. So I actually just saw this meme or something on Instagram that was like, a great leader uses these 4 or 5 words. And it was like, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So, to be able to be humble, admit that you don't have all the answers. I also think that kind of relates to being an inclusive leader. So, get rid of this like hierarchy, like I'm the boss, you're not, like welcome all ideas, be a collaborative leader, give other people a chance to shine. I do that a lot with my team, the team that I manage. I want to develop them to maybe one day take my job. And so I give them opportunities to have autonomy and come up with their own ideas and, meet with the superintendent or lead the meeting with the superintendent, and I'll sit back, So I don't know if I articulated that well, Ed, but, being humble, inclusive, and collaborative, I think makes a good leader in my opinion.
And I think one thing you said that's really important is letting others shine, right?
Yeah.
It's like bringing up your team with you, because that's what makes a good leader, right? Is having a great team. So you always want to give them credit too. So Joanna would like to know, who had a big impact on your career?
Ooh. Joanna, I think it was that boss that I talked about that brought me to North Carolina. So, when I was in Maryland working for him, his name is Eric Davis. He just saw something in me, I think, and he really believed in me and gave me opportunities, just kind of what I talked about a second ago. He let me shine and lead my own work. And then when it came time for him to move on and he had an open position and he thought of me, that in itself was just so empowering. And then when I made that move to North Carolina, it changed my life. I mentioned it changed my life in terms of my perspective on the world. I'm so much more, I don't like this word, but woke. I don't have a better word right now, but so much more woke to stuff. I, grew as a person. I met who would become my future spouse by moving to North Carolina. So, he changed my life in my career and then my personal life too. So just the fact that he believed in me, saw something in me, gave me chances. He's been the single most important, mentor or supervisor I think I've ever had.
Yeah, that's great. Erica would like to know, what skill do you most need when raising money?
Oh, great question, Erica.
I would also like to know this.
So I think it's, I don't know how he would say this is a skill. Maybe it's fearlessness, but like, you just have to be like unafraid for people to say no. So like, the worst that could happen is that someone says no. And that's really not so bad. You're like, okay, that wasn't, a good fit for you. So you have to be a little bit fearless and a little bit like, what's the worst that can happen? But again, I think it's also the stick-to-itiveness or the the reliance on the mission. So as long as you are, wedded to your mission, you believe in your mission, you believe in what the purpose of your asking for, that really can't fail you. And that's a really important skill, because at the end of the day, I sort of flip it. And when I'm going to ask someone for money, I'm like, it is a privilege for me to ask you for this money because it's for kids. So like, it's not like, so as long as you stick to that mission and the core, it's sort of like, this is a great opportunity. Like, I'm proud to be asking you for money. I'm not scared or intimidated. I'm like, this is an amazing cause. Yeah. So like, why wouldn't you want to give money to this? So yeah, those would be like kind of the two things, like a little bit fearless. What's the worst that can happen? And then, it can't hurt to ask. It just can't hurt to ask. And you have to ask, because if you don't, then there's no way you're going to get the money. And then just believe.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. They can't say yes unless you ask.
Right.
The other thing that's helped me in sort of asking for things, and especially the money thing, is storytelling. You said focus on your mission and just really stick to what it is you're asking for and why. So if you like paint the picture of how, like, who it is you're helping, why you're helping them, how this will help, it's a very logical conclusion. Like, of course I want to help kids, so.
Yeah, excellent point. And it's sort of like, also, within that, like, what's at stake if you don't give them money, like the narrative around like, if not for your investment, X is going to happen, or because of your investment, Y is going to happen. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah. James wants to know, what is the best way to work with someone or to network with someone right now?
Ooh,
That's a good one. That's
that's a
hard.
good
It's
one,
hard right now.
James. So I think the best way is kind of what I alluded to before, is maybe starting like one-on-one or like with a small group and maybe reaching out to someone. I mean, the best tactic that I've ever found, two tactics. One is just reaching out to someone who you admire or want to meet, and just saying, like, I have no agenda. I just want to meet you and, talk to you. Like, would you consider having a virtual cup of tea or coffee or, lunch with me? Or maybe they are comfortable meeting in person, but, most of what I've seen lately has been virtual. But yeah, I mean, like reaching out to someone, just saying like, there's, don't say I want to talk to you so I can get a job, or just say like, I want to meet you, I want to learn about you, you seem like a great person to know. People 9 times out of 10, maybe even 10 out of 10 will say absolutely, like, let's talk.
Sure.
And then if you don't feel comfortable reaching out directly, if you can find like a 1 or 2 steps away, or 6 degrees connection to that person. So like, sometimes I'll be like, ooh, I want to meet someone at Coca-Cola, but I don't know someone myself, and I don't feel comfortable just cold calling. I'll ask a friend who I know knows someone at Coca-Cola and say, will you introduce me? So I think in this time where like there's not big networking events, or maybe like a lot of I feel like Kashi, like you probably are used to going to a lot of like breakfasts and galas and stuff, but we haven't done that in so
They're
long.
all virtual now.
Yeah. So those are great ways to do it in real life. But in lieu of that, I think just like either reaching out for a virtual call, or just trying to get to someone, through your current connections and your existing connections, is probably what I would do. Or, another thing is maybe instead of a new person, maybe think about calling someone that you haven't talked to in a while, a connection that, is going to be valuable. But maybe someone like, that's called stewardship in the like fundraising world, is like, you already know them, but maybe it's worth catching up, and seeing what they're up to and telling them what you're up to.
Yeah, definitely. Going deeper with the relationship that
Yeah.
you already have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. LinkedIn is a great tool right now, right?
Yeah.
Just and to your point, if you're a student, I mean, if you're asking for advice, whoever you are, like most likely people are like, yeah, of course, I'd love to share how smart I am with you.
Yeah.
But
people love to talk about themselves.
People love to talk about themselves. That's right. But if you say you're a student, especially, I mean, who's going to say no? Really, you have to be a cold person to be like, no, I'm not going to talk to you. So just put it out there, guys. Put it out there. I think that's what Rachel's trying to say today. It's like, just ask, just put it out there. Take the leap.
Yeah.
All right. A couple more before we wrap up. Let's see. Let me pick one we haven't done yet. Okay. Charles wants to know how your current role uses what you learned in school.
Oh man, Charles.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, I think I'll go back to the writing thing. I mean, I use my writing skills all the time, and I use my communication skills all the time. And that was worthwhile to me, to really study something very specific, and really like hone a specific skill. So I use that a lot. In terms of like my liberal arts degrees and kind of what I learned in high school, I mean, it's kind of true. Like, I definitely was not strong in math at all, as a student. And I was like, when am I going to need to use this and stuff? I have to use math all the time, in fundraising, in grants, in setting budgets. And so it has come back to be very useful. So I apologize to my teachers who I like I rolled out when I was like, algebra, this is dumb. It's not dumb. And then, yeah, I mean, I think just, learning what I learned with my American Studies degree, my sociology degree, it's just, I learned so much information about, like I said, human behavior. And like I said, my job is all about relationships. So I do rely on just like some of the psychology classes I took or some of the classes I took about history to be able to have information to just build relationships with. So like I'm almost like a sponge, I think. Like I just retain information really well. It's just something I've been really lucky as a skill that I have. Just input is kind of what I'm good at. And I use that, my good memory to, build relationships. So like, Kashi, like, let's use you as an example. Like, I know you're a Lead Atlanta alum. So like, I would reach out to you and be like, hey, have you talked to your lead class lately? Or how is your husband? Or like, I know you just got married. So like, retaining information is a huge skill for relationship building, which is something, like I mentioned, I use all the time.
Yeah. By the way, if you're not good at that stuff, you can like make notes. Like if you have contacts, you can like write your notes out. Like this is this is like Rachel's husband's name, and this is all the things. She has a dog. She has whatever.
Yes, so, great idea.
Keep notes.
Sometimes I do that before I meet with someone too. I'll pull their LinkedIn, to see where they went to college and stuff like that. Because maybe you have a commonality, or you can see if they're in a sorority or something like that. So yeah, and then keep those little nuggets filed away somewhere, so you remember the next time you talk to them.
Yep. All right, last one, Rachel, because I know we're running out of time. Maria wants to know, what was a hard lesson to learn and what has been your greatest achievement so far?
Oh, wow. Thank you for that question, Marie. Okay, the hard lesson to learn was about leadership. So I'm a relatively new manager in the sense of I never managed people until 4 years ago when I got promoted from the grant writer to the executive director. And I started off as a manager, like really wanting everyone to like me. And, I wanted my staff to feel, happy all the time. And that I ended up sacrificing myself a lot for that. So what ended up happening was I wouldn't delegate work to them because I wouldn't want them to be overloaded. And that was really a mistake because they don't grow when I don't delegate. And then I'm overwhelmed and stressed because I have too much on my plate. So I've learned that, you can be a good leader by being kind and nice, of course, but also, delegating and having, high expectations. And the hard lesson was when my teammates left. I had 2 people kind of quit at the same time, and for different reasons, but I took it very personally because I was like, what? I was such a good boss, but I learned that, like we've touched on this before, it's almost like a compliment when your people leave you, because that means they've learned and they have skills and someone else wants to hire them. So I've learned that lesson just about not taking things too personally, helped a lot. And then, or was a hard lesson, but it helped a lot. And my biggest achievement, my favorite achievement was I raised enough money a couple years ago to send 1,600 APS sophomores to go see Hamilton, the musical, at the Fox Theater.
Oh my gosh.
So the Hamilton musical was coming to the Fox Theater, and our superintendent really wanted our kids to go see it. And so I had to work for years, even before it came to Atlanta, to secure the ticket. I had to convince them, hold the tickets. Then I had to raise the money for the tickets. I had to raise money for dinner for them before the show, a t-shirt for every kid. It was so much hard work, but it was so rewarding when our kids got to see Hamilton on opening night and the second night. We had two nights, and they were interspersed with patrons of the arts and all these, people who probably spent so much money to go see Hamilton.
Yes.
So yeah, just that is, I'll always look back on that as like my favorite thing that I ever did. And I just like to think that maybe some of the kids that saw that show were either inspired to pursue the arts themselves, or maybe got interested in Hamilton. I don't know. Maybe they were inspired by Hamilton's story. So, but it was awesome, and I'm really proud of that.
What a fun thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. And what great experience for the kids. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. We are out of time, if you can believe it or not.
Yeah.
So everyone, you can find our upcoming schedule for all of our amazing speakers like Rachel on our website, supernovacommence.com. And you can find us all over the web, #Supernova Commencements. We make it very easy for us to be found. Our next speaker next week is Michael Russell. He is CEO of H.J. Russell, which is one of the largest African-American owned construction services business in the United States. His dad was also really amazing and one of the leaders of Atlanta. So it's going to be a great discussion. Rachel, do you have any parting words for our students?
I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Kashi, for having this series. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so humbled to be included among people like Mr. Russell and others you've had. It was so fun. It was such a great opportunity. And I really thank the students for, your interest in wanting to like pursue your dreams. And I guess I never thought of myself as one of those like go get them, like take risks people. But I think after a conversation today, Kashi, you made me realize like maybe I am, and it's worked out. So take risks. That's my parting words, and go for it. And you never know what can happen.
Yeah, take the leap. You're definitely taking leaps, Rachel, and we appreciate it. Students, have a great week. Make the most of this unique time. Use it to your advantage. It's an opportunity. And remember, it's a blessing to be a blessing. So be kind as you go through your day today. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next week. Bye.